This is CNN Breaking News.
And here's the breaking news on a Friday night. A federal judge temporarily halting President Trump's travel ban nationwide. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. The ruling coming in Washington state, where Attorney General Bob Ferguson says tonight, quote, no one is above the law, not even the president. It follows a week of protests at airports and across the country. But tonight's ruling throws the nation's immigration system into chaos again. Let's get right to CNN's senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta and aviation correspondent Renee Marsh. Good evening to you. If we thought we were going to ease into our weekend, Jim, we were sorely mistaken here. Federal judge is granting that Washington State Attorney General's request to immediately halt this executive order on immigration. You have been looking at the details, so bring us up to speed.
Right. Well, according to what has happened out in Washington state, there is now a temporary restraining order that was issued by a judge in that state, essentially siding with the Washington State Attorney General, who has asked for a restraining order, a stoppage to this executive order that banned people from coming in from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. According to the Washington State Attorney General, who's been on our air for a good portion of this night, this is now a nationwide restraining order that was issued by this judge. And I do believe we have some sound from this Attorney General. Here's what he had to say earlier tonight.
Judge Robart's decision, effective immediately, effective now, puts a halt to President Trump's unconstitutional and unlawful executive order. I want to repeat that. It puts a stop to it immediately, nationwide.
And I don't want to preempt what Renee Marsh is going to say in a few moments, but we do understand from what she's been saying, talking to her sources, is that Customs and Border Protection has been in touch with the airlines, saying that they can go ahead and get back to business and start reinstating visas and so forth. I've just gotten in touch with a source over the Department of Homeland Security, Don, trying to get some more guidance on this. I'm told some kind of statement is going to be coming from the Department of Homeland Security, and here's a critical reason why. Don, we've been here for several hours over here at the White House tonight. We have not gotten any kind of guidance, any kind of statement from this White House as to what just occurred in Washington state. And so the question that I have in my mind, Don, is how could Customs and Border Protection issue that guidance to U.S. airlines saying we're going to get back to business without the approval of the President of the United States, the man who signed the executive order? But at this point, we just have no clarity, no kind of statement from the White House at this point, though I am told by a source over at the Department of Homeland Security that they do plan on issuing some kind of statement tonight. And the State Department also released a statement saying basically the same thing, that they're looking at what has happened over in Washington state, and they're going to be working with the Department of Homeland Security on the next steps. But it is, I think it's a pretty extraordinary development if these airlines are going to be, quote, getting back to business before this executive order, Don.
Yeah, it appears this judge has overruled the president, and we'll get more guidance from our legal experts coming up in a bit. Jim, stand by. I want to get Renee in. Renee, sure. Jim mentioned the visas are being reinstated. That's the reporting that we have here. Tell us more about this, because this is a really extraordinary development if that is happening.
Yeah, that's not an understatement. Extremely extraordinary. We do know, based on a source with the airline industry, an airline official telling me that around 9 o'clock there was a conference call between Customs and Border Protection as well as all of the major U.S. airlines. On that call, Customs and Border Protection informed the airlines that things were, quote, going back to business as usual before the executive order. And on that call, the airlines were also told that visas would start being reinstated. I can tell you that since we got word of that bit of information, we've been monitoring all of the airlines' websites, and so far we noticed that American Airlines has stripped down all of its travel alerts relating to this ban. That is no longer on their website, and so we are starting to see these airlines one by one react. Again, so far, American Airlines stripping down those travel alerts that referred to that travel ban from their website tonight, Don.
So what does this mean for the people who had been banned or couldn't come in? Can they now come back in?
Well, so we, just as Jim said there, although we're getting this information from the sources who were actually on that call, we still haven't heard anything official from the government. So we're waiting for that. But let's just say that this is what the situation is, and things are going back to business as usual prior to the executive order. What would happen is that CBP would need to reset their parameters so that when someone does show up at an airport with their travel documents and it's scanned through that automatic computer system, the airline doesn't get a no board message. They get a board message. And so it will be up to CBP to make all those changes so that this can all go smoothly. But I think right now the focus is making sure everyone understands where CBP stands on this, where the federal government stands on this as it relates to this ruling. The airlines will follow what they're told. They will not make their own decisions on this.
I've got a statement from the White House.
Go for it, Jim.
Okay. This is a statement from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, just hit my inbox. At the earliest possible time, the Department of Justice intends to file an emergency stay of this outrageous order. Forgive me for reading down. We don't have time to put this up on screen. And defend the executive order of the president, which we believe is lawful and appropriate. The president's order is intended to protect the homeland, and he has the constitutional authority and responsibility to protect the American people. As the law states, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens, that's government language there, or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States.
Not in any way obviate the fact that this president is totally bound by this order. We expect him to abide by this order. We will not accept any deviation from this order whatsoever. The Constitution is supreme in this country, and frankly, I'm proud that Washington State has led the country in standing up for the basic values and will not allow anyone, including the president in Washington, D.C., to contravene those values. And we had tonight a federal judge who was appointed by Republican President George W. Bush decide a very forceful decision, frankly, that this is a country that we are not going to allow the tests of religion to determine who comes in our country. We are not going to allow decisions that actually jeopardize our national security. Look, the fact is in this case that the people from these 7 countries, there have been 700,000 refugees admitted since the disaster of September 11th, and not one incident has occasioned where people from these 7 countries caused a fatal terrorist act. So I know they want to talk about aliens. Let me tell you what they call aliens. They're Microsoft engineers. They're Boeing salesmen. They're cancer researchers. They're students at the University of Washington who are helping build my state economically. And this order hurts my whole state's economy besides being unconstitutional. So I'm quite glad that this federal court has stood up and provided what this nation needs, which are checks and balances, and we expect this president to follow them. Now, they've got a right to appeal. We'll let them do so. But I think we know that the values of this country are going to be defended in the courts.
And Governor, if you can you stand by, because I want to bring my attorneys in. Can we get Alan Dershowitz and Michael Higginbotham in? Okay, so Alan and Michael, Governor, stay there, because the governor says that the president is bound by this order and by this judge. Alan,
well, first
you first.
of all, I think it's very important, the White House statement. The White House statement could have said that the president is going to follow the order of the Massachusetts judge, and he could have caused a major confrontation with the Washington judge. It's very important that the White House said, no, the president is going to appeal the order to the Ninth Circuit. That's the way it should be. So we're going to get an appeal to the Ninth Circuit by the president, by the Justice Department. We're going to get an appeal to the First Circuit by the plaintiffs, who feel that they got the wrong result when the judge in Massachusetts denied them a temporary restraining order. We're going to get potentially conflicting decisions by different circuits. Ultimately, it'll get to the Supreme Court, which is now divided 4-4. And if you want to hear something very interesting, the justice who has now been nominated to serve on the Supreme Court, Gorsuch, says in his yearbook, attributing the quote to Kissinger, the illegal we do right away, the unconstitutional takes a little bit more time. So if we're talking about a system of checks and balances, I think we have a little bit to worry about when the new ninth justice comes on the court, who has, at least as a young person, said he has no problem with illegal or unconstitutional.
Okay, all right, so stand by. We've still got time for that. That hasn't happened yet. So, Michael, I just want to bring you in before I bring the governor back. What is the governor is saying that the president is bound by this order and this judge. Do you see it that way?
Well, yes, I do. And I think it's important, if you look at the statement, I think it's very important that the president follows the rule of law. I mean, we have a separation of powers principle. It's very important. And each branch must respect the other branches. And so the president executes the law, but the courts interpret the law. And here you have two judges, one from Washington, one from Massachusetts. They have conflicting interpretations, and that must be decided by the court. So you're going to appeal to the Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit, First Circuit. They'll make a decision, and this will eventually go to the Supreme Court. Yeah. That's what's supposed to happen. That's what makes our country so special.
Yeah. And Governor Inslee, you're an attorney as well, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So then how long, given the circumstances of the information that we have now, the statement from the White House, what the judge ordered earlier, how long will it take for this to play out and to unravel?
Yeah, I can't predict that. It could be months, it could be years. We don't know the answer to that.
But it won't happen overnight. We're not looking at a matter of a couple of days, do you think?
Well, it's possible. I suppose the Court of Appeals could act with that alacrity, but I doubt that'll be the situation. What we do know, though, is until further order of the judicial system, this order stands. It's important that people understand that. This is a historic moment in our country. I do believe, at least in my lifetime, except when President Nixon was around, this is the moment where we are most in need of judges in the separate branch of the judicial system to save our liberties. And I have to tell you, we need a strong judiciary in this country because our liberties are at risk from those who want to put us into the chaotic situation of choosing one religion over another. And so this is a moment we need a strong judicial system. I believe we've got one, and we certainly had one tonight, and I'm proud that we had the beacon of liberty shining out of Seattle tonight. Nationwide.
Governor, I have to ask you, our Jim Acosta read this statement, and I just have a copy of it here. I just want to read you the first part and ask you a question about it. It says, at the earliest possible time, the Department of Justice intends to file an emergency stay of this outrageous order and defend the executive order of the president, and then he said, which we believe is lawful and appropriate. So to file an emergency stay, how long would that take? Can they do that at this hour?
I suppose that's possible. But rather than speculate, let's just know one thing right now. President Donald Trump doesn't have the right to call anybody outrageous, given the chaos he caused by this unplanned decision, which has created such tumult and trauma and injury across the nation. We don't appreciate that characterization. This judge is a Republican-appointed judge. He ruled on the Constitution and the facts. He looked at the fact that none of these people from these 7 countries were involved in one terrorist act. I'm concerned about this from a national security standpoint. I have people from our base here in Washington fighting in Iraq. But the last thing we want is a recruiting poster for ISIS, and that's frankly what this executive order is. So for a lot of reasons, I hope that we're going to continue to have a strong judicial system to rein in this president who's done damage to this country already.
So our Renee Marsh, who is listening as well, said that they're getting back to business, and they've ordered that all visas from the 7 countries singled out in this executive order that they were revoked. And so what does that mean? So now they said it's back to business as usual. What do you make of that, Governor?
I don't know. Yeah, well, listen, the Customs, it sounds like what the agency is doing is following the order, which is erases this as if it had never happened. And now, again, we're going to be able to have, Expedia salespeople go sell their products around the world and not worry about.
So these people can travel back into your state, right? Is that what this
says
now?
Yes. From what I've heard, I'm relying on your excellent reporting for that. I don't have independent confirmation about it. But if, in fact, that's what the agency is saying, these folks ought to have the same rights they did as if this executive order had never happened. Yeah. And that's important for a lot of people. Look, these are my neighbors. These are executives. These are physicians. These are cancer researchers. And because this president didn't give 2 seconds thought as to what they were really doing, because he didn't bother to pick up the phone and talk to his cabinet members, he issued a rogue order which caused all this chaos for business people and researchers and students in my state. So I'm really happy that we restored an ounce of sanity in this country, and I hope it will continue.
Governor Jay Inslee, thank you for your time, but don't go far away from the phone. We may need you because you never know what can happen. We thought we were